Really sorry to hear that. Awfully glad you stopped by. Just hope the visits will be more frequent. My all-time favorite was a homie who called me from jail, collect. A guy named Loco who had just read this in the newspaper, and he said, "Hey, what's up with this leukemia anyway?" I said, "Well, it's cancer. It's in the blood. The doctor says my white count's too high." And doctors, he said, "They don't be knowing nothing." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, hello, of course your white count's high." So I've decided to call all that kinship, along with second opinions. Kinship, that we're in this together. Homeboy Industries, as was mentioned by Barbara eloquently in the introduction, was born during the time I was pastor of Dolores Mission Parish, the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, nestled in the middle of two public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. And together they comprised the largest grouping of public housing west of Mississippi. At that time we had 8 gangs in that parish, half the gangs at war with the other half, leading the LAPD to call it the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city was right there in my parish. I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988, and I've buried 169, my 169th. A month ago, a young man named Irvin, who was 19 years old, waiting for a bus at 7 in the morning to come to work. Somebody must have driven by and recalled the past he might have had. So in the early days, we did a lot of things. We started a school because there were so many junior high age kids from gangs who had been given the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them. And that brought gang members to the church, which jostled the idea of what a church ought to be. Hermetically sealed, good people in, bad people out. That kind of messed with that idea a little bit. And then gang members kept saying if only we had jobs, and so myself and mainly the women, because there were only women in the projects in those days, single mothers, we marched and we went around to all the factories that surrounded the housing projects trying to find felony-friendly employers. And that was as forthcoming as you could imagine it to be. So by 1992, the demand was too great, and so we said, well, let's start our own businesses. So we started Homeboy Bakery in 1992, an old 80-year-old building bakery across the street from the church. 1 month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market in downtown LA. Once we had 2 businesses, we came up with the highfalutin Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this endeavor. And then we were off and running. And it's important to recognize always that anything worth doing is worth failing at. We had a lot of bad businesses in those days and that didn't work so well, like Homeboy Plumbing was not a huge success. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. But now we're the largest gang intervention program in the U.S. of A. About 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors. Keep in mind there are 1,100 gangs in LA County, 86,000 gang members. And they walk through our doors to receive a whole comprehensive menu of services from anger management and parenting to every imaginable 12-step program. Huge mental health component, about 8 therapists, 4 job developers who try to find employment in the private sector. Huge tattoo removal services. We have 3 laser machines, 12 doctors, 4,000 laser treatments a year. No place on the planet removes more gang tattoos than we do. And we have our businesses, as was mentioned, but along with those, our farmers markets, our solar panel training program, Homeboy Bakery, Homeboy Silkscreen, Homeboy Homegrown Merchandise, where we sell our logo stuff, and Homegrown Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. And they cater. And hugely gourmet, wonderful food. About 3 months ago, the Oscar-winning actress and movie star Diane Keaton came for lunch, and she had never been to Homegirl Cafe. It's a place to see celebs, so make sure you come. And she had come with a regular, a guy who's been there once a week, and her waitress this day is Glinda. Now, Glinda is a been there, done that, homegirl, gang member, tattooed, been to prison, parolee. She does not know who Diane Keaton is. So she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, well, what do you recommend? And Glinda says, well, I like this, this, and this, and she rattles off 3 platillos that she likes in a particular way. And Diane Keaton says, well, I'll have that second one. And then something dawns on Glinda. She goes, gosh, you feel so familiar, like I know you, like I've met you somewhere. And Diane Keaton chooses to deflect it humbly. Oh gosh, I don't know, I suppose I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before. And then Glenda goes, no, now I know. We were locked up together. That just took my breath away when I heard it. And I don't believe anybody's had a Diane Keaton sighting since that moment. But suddenly kinship so quickly. Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, that's exactly what God had in mind, that you might be one. That's the hope. All of us are called to be what Alice Miller, the late child psychologist, called enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. You don't hold the bar up, you just ask people to measure up. You just show up and you hold the mirror up and you tell people their truth. And lucky for all of us that their truth is your truth and my truth is a gang member's truth. It's all the same truth. Here's the truth. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then people become that truth. People inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce that. And no 4 prison walls can keep that out. And death can't touch it because it's so huge. In fact, knowing that truth is a way of putting death in its place and keeping first things recognizably first, so that you have a light grasp on this life, and death is a punk. I was just reading, parenthetically, a profile of the Dalai Lama in the New Yorker, and the reporter asked the Dalai Lama about his own death, and he shrugged and he smiled and he said, change of clothing. I love that. I want what he's having. Parentheses within a parentheses, apparently in the same article, Oprah had interviewed him once and asked him, so you think the whole world should meditate? And he thinks, he goes, stupid question. I love that. Who hasn't wanted to say that to Oprah? But I digress. It's about holding the mirror up and you return people to themselves, and in the process you get returned to yourself. It's a beautiful way that God has sort of designed this, it seems to me. But with the poor and the powerless and the people on the margins, with the demonized and the disposable, you have to reach in and you have to dismantle messages of shame and disgrace that are quite vexing. The great scripture scholar Marcus Borg says that the principal suffering of the poor throughout Scripture and throughout history is shame and disgrace. And so before anybody can see the truth of who they are, you have to dismantle things a little bit. I'm in 25 different detention facilities where I do celebrate the Eucharist in all the probation camps in LA County, juvenile halls, youth authority facilities, jails, or the occasional prison. And usually on Saturdays, I do a couple in the morning, a couple masses in the probation camps, which are quite far away, and then I race home to Dolores Mission. And usually I have about a half hour before it begins. And I've been in that community for 25 years, so I know a lot of people, and I'm asked to do a lot of sacraments. So it begins, 1 o'clock baptisms, 2 o'clock wedding, 3 o'clock quinceañera, 4 o'clock exorcism. I'm just checking to see if you're actually still listening to me. I was having my doubts there. So I flew home years ago, and I flew home, and I had about 20 minutes till 1 before baptisms began. So I said, well, I'm going to go to my office on 1st Street, and not far from the church, go through the mail for that day. And so there I was, contento and feliz, going through the mail, all by myself, when suddenly this woman barges through the front door. I find out later her name is Lisa. She's 35 years old. This is the very first moment she's ever chosen to enter my office. I've seen her around on the streets because she's sort of famous or infamous. She's a heroin addict, prostitute, gang member, felon, parolee. She's kind of a famous gritona. She's always screaming. She'll be screaming at the guy who tosses her out of the bar next door. She'll be on a payphone hollering at people on the phone, just let me stay tonight. Family members or friends. And this is the moment, the first time she's chosen to enter my office. And now I have 7 minutes before my baptism begins. She walks right into my inner sanctum office, and she plunks herself down, and she launches right in. I need help. Oh, I've been to like 50 rehabs. I'm known all over, nationwide. She says, I went to Catholic schools all my life, elementary. I even graduated from Sacred Heart High School in Lincoln Heights. And then she gets quiet and still. In fact, first time I ever used heroin was right after my graduation. And I've been trying to stop since the moment I began. And I watched as she rested her head on the wall behind her, and her eyes became like two ponds, water rising to meet its edges, spilling over, and she cried and she cried, until she leveled her eyes at me, and she said with great deliberation, I